Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch by interviewing authors, discussing their books, learning about the writing process, and even, on occasion, chatting live with a panel of authors to discuss topics relevant to both readers and writers. My guest today on Online for Authors is Tomasina Decrescenzo, author of the book Two Left Feet, her debut novel. Tomasina's book, though fiction, is filled to the brim with stories of her childhood and what it was like to grow up in an Italian immigrant family in New York. The main character, Mikey, short for Michelina, regales readers with childhood stories from magic wine to witches' curses to only being able to find two left sneakers when buying shoes for the summer. Tomasina is a wonderful storyteller and had me laughing out loud. Welcome to Online for Authors. Today we have Tomasina Decrescenzo, who is the author of Two Left Feet. Welcome, Tomasina.
Thank you so much for having me, for interviewing me on this podcast. I really appreciate it.
Oh, we're excited to have you here today. I loved your book, but before we get started and go any further, I want you to kind of give the listeners, your elevator pitch. What is this book, Two Left Feet, about?
Well, it has a lot of more subtle meanings, undercover sort of meanings other than the obvious. So it's not really about not being a good dancer. Actually, I came up with the title because it all comes to play in one chapter where my mother took me to get my summer sneakers, and I waited for the last minute, and it was like a bargain store, and we were going through this big bin, and there were only lefts left. So she said, this is what happens when you wait the last minute, you get whatever's left. And I said, yeah, I got what was left, all right, two of them. But in that Brooklynese kind of Brooklyn kid kind of dialogue. But then it coming into play are like more subtle meanings of, two left feet. Yeah, it was about dancing. I gave my aunt some dance lessons because she thought she had two left feet. And it had to do with having self-confidence in yourself, which came into play later on in the chapters. And then at the very end, I sort of made kind of like a childish kind of acknowledgement that, wow, I thought of the Wizard of Oz, how, Dorothy and the Tin Man, and they went to the wizard and they were looking for what they already always had in themselves, which was their confidence. Right. So all those subtle meanings, I think, came into play. I don't know if it came across to you or not about the two left feet meaning.
They did.
Yeah.
I loved it. Okay. It was great. So how much of this book is autobiographical?
Well, most of the characters are autobiographical. The setting is autobiographical. I changed the names to protect the guilty, of course. But I started out, it just started coming out, and it just evolved, as I would say it's maybe historical fiction, fact, based on historical facts, but a lot of it is real and a lot of it is fiction. Okay. But the actual character, I guess I was the 11-year-old girl, and my family members, all their names are the same. My classmates, my friends, I changed the names of the neighbors, but most of the actual people, if they read the book, they kind of knew it was.
They would know themselves.
Yeah, and then I know you were talking about my mother. I said, no, it's a work of fiction. Any resemblance to any characters, living or dead, are purely fictitious. Yeah. So I tried to cover myself that way.
Well, I noticed one of the things that you did was you gave the main character the name Michelina. Right. And yours is Tomasina. And I'm assuming that you did that this character is you.
Right,
this
exactly.
character is you, but you just gave her a different name.
Is that?
Right. And yeah, exactly. Yeah. I gave her a different name because I didn't want to give my real name, but I wanted to give a similar name that was like an Italian American name, and how this kid was burdened with this weird name, which actually is what I went through. But I changed the name. Yeah.
Right, right. I loved her whole explanation, your explanation as to why she got her name. Is that
Oh, okay.
truly why you got yours? Or
No,
was
not at
that
all.
was it? Okay.
No,
Okay.
no, not at all. No.
So where did Tomasina come from in your family?
Oh boy. All right. Well, okay, I'm going to tell the truth. All right. It's a very strange story, and I'm just going to put it out there. So, my father, believe this or not, before he was married to my mother, was married to a woman named Tomasina, and they were both very, very young. She died in childbirth. Her and the baby both died. So he met my mother a few years later, and I don't know, I wasn't there with the conversation, but obviously he asked my mother to name me after her. And when I grew up, I asked my mother, I said, wow, that was weird. Why did you do that? She said, why should I be jealous of a dead woman? So my mother was way before her time, very independent, but it was strange because she knew the family of this dead woman, and her parents would come visit me as a kid and bring me gifts, and I'm saying, why are they bringing me all these gifts? Because I was named after her dead daughter. So
Right.
it's a very weird story, but it's true. So yeah.
Well, generally, if your book has any truth to it at all, you had a generally weird childhood in a lot of ways. Like there were a lot of unusual characters
Yeah. Well,
that kind of
a lot of the characters were real. They really existed. I just changed their names.
right.
The one about the guy who chased me up the stairs and tried to kill me because I yelled out 1, 2, 3. That was a real character. And that really did happen. He chased me and my brother up the stairs, and we got in the door just in the nick of time. The characters like Winston and Norman, those were real people on my block. And they were what you would call maybe a little marginal type
Yeah.
of characters, and actually, I'm just telling the truth now. I was an 11-year-old girl reflecting life back in the early 1960s
Exactly.
and what life was like. Now, my daughter, who was 46, it's like, oh, that's terrible. She felt that the book was controversial because she said I was prejudiced. I was, calling people names like retard and stuff. And I said, I did not do that. You didn't get the point. The point was, I was telling it as it was. Those were the words that people used back in the day. Would I use those words now? Of course not. But I was an 11-year-old child. It was her perspective of what she saw going on in the world.
Right.
And I said, the mean boys would call him that word. But then what I tried to do, and I hope it came across, at the end of every chapter, I tried to put a moral to the story as what did she learn during this adventure.
I loved
And
that because she was this 11-year-old who is coming close to that age where you start to not become an adult, but become way more
right,
aware of who you are and how you're fitting into the life that you're leading. And she would come to the ends of those chapters and have that little
right,
tidbit of, well, maybe I won't say that anymore, or maybe I won't do that
right,
anymore, or maybe I learned something, or maybe now I understand why they are the way they are, or act the way they act, or say the things that
exactly.
they say. And I loved that.
Right. And I specifically gave these characters redeeming value as to giving them superpowers, so that as to like, you can't judge a book by its cover, so to
Right,
speak, right?
right.
Because you would look at them and say, what weirdos. But Norman, I gave him a magic radio. So he had this superpower. And, so I specifically did that. But it wasn't really so much of a conscious effort. It just actually, to be honest, it just just came out.
Just
It
the way
just,
it was.
once I started, I typed it on an old-fashioned typewriter with whiteout, believe it or not. And once I started typing it, it just started flowing out. So I tried to, like, it was like putting a jigsaw puzzle together. And I think it came together okay.
It did. It did. Like I said, I love that idea of kind of the moral to the story is so you're really
Right.
watching her. She kind of starts out in the book very much a child and kind
Yeah.
of ends the book very much
Yeah.
an adolescent, like she's moving along and she's starting to really recognize, things about herself and her family and her neighborhood even that
Right.
allow her to show some growth. I thought that was really great.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm curious, the chapters, they could almost be short stories. Like they could
Right.
almost
Right.
be alone. Did you write it
Yes.
that way? Did you write
No,
like a series of short stories and
yes.
then put them together?
Yeah, well, yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Actually, what happened was when COVID hit and I was locked in the house by myself for 2 years, I had this big red box in the closet of short stories. They weren't all short stories, of course. There were maybe like 7 or 8, whatever, maybe about. And I decided maybe they were chapters of a book. And that's how I took the short stories out. And like a jigsaw puzzle, I said, well, how can I fit them together to create a whole story?
Right.
And that's how I put it together. Of course, I had to. Then I started elaborating and adding more. Well, what else can I write about? Who else can I put in? And then once I decided on a theme, like a person, basically I started with a character. And then I created a fictitious scenario based on that actual person. And some of the events actually occurred just as I wrote them. I just changed the names.
Right.
But some of the events, I kind of, like the beginning about the Michelina named after the witch. That didn't really happen, but the things about my classmates, those things really happened. And the street fights with the neighbors and
I listened to it because I really love audiobooks as well. And so I go back and forth between, either reading or listening. And because yours was available, I went ahead and listened to it. And at that point, I had tears rolling down my eyes as everyone's standing out on the front porch, watching the brawl happen. And it was just, I could just see that happening. I loved that.
Thank you. Yeah, and I did it, the audiobook was in my own voice, of course.
That's what I was just about to say was I wasn't sure when I was listening to it whether it was, but as soon as you and I started having a conversation, it was like, I know this voice. I listened to this voice through the whole story. So, I think that's a huge undertaking. Tell me a little bit about like doing that aspect of narrating your own book.
Okay, well, the actual book publisher referred me to their audio book people, and they wanted, besides charging me, a lot of money, they wanted to hire an actor to narrate the book. And I said, no, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do my own narration, because who knows these characters and their voices better than me, because I lived with them and I created them, right? So I pursued it on my own, and a close friend of mine is the poet laureate of Nassau County, Long Island, and she has a radio station, and her sound tech engineer, who happens to be a very good friend, she referred me to him, and that's how I went to his recording studio.
Fantastic.
And it was so much fun. It was about 6 months in the record, because the book is, I think, 42 chapters, like over 300 pages. And it was very tech, and it was so much fun, doing the whole recording and getting the voices of the characters. And it was a lot of fun.
So I read on one of your bios, I think on Amazon, that you've done some acting. So doing voices is not new to you. Tell me a little bit about this whole side acting thing that you've done and still are doing, right?
Yeah,
I'm still doing
it. Yeah. Well, I basically always, let's say I got the award for class clown in high school. So it started there pretty much when I fell off the stage in a makeshift mock law trial, whatever. Someone was supposed to push me, and they pushed me too hard. I went flying backstage off the curtain. And needless to say, my class won the prize for putting on the best show. So I caught the acting bug then, I think. And I always, made my friends laugh, doing jokes and that kind of thing, voices of characters. And so then over the years, I started doing a one-woman show with character voices and skits and stand-up comedy. I did that many places, in the city, in New York City and the boroughs, and I'm still doing it. And then I've been doing New York dinner theater shows for almost the past 20 years, which is so much fun. I just recently did one in Niagara Falls, Connecticut, Philadelphia. And we're like a troupe, and New York Dinner Theater Company. If your organization or whatever wants to put on a fundraiser, you contact my producer, and we have various shows, that we come in. It's very interactive, and it's just like going to the best, funniest wedding you ever went to. So I'm just grateful that I still get a chance to do that.
That it sounds fun. It sounds like you're very creative, that writing isn't the only creative outlet that you have, that you do a lot of other.
Right.
So I also read that you were.
I paint also. I also do paint.
Oh yeah. Wow. Okay. So I read that you were an OR nurse.
Right.
What is it that kind of changed you to decide that now is the time you wanted to be an author?
That it didn't happen that way. I have a very what would I say, like serious side, and then I have the creative side. So I knew I had to make a living. So when my daughter was a baby, I went back to school and I became an OR nurse. So anyway, even while I was working, I tried to work part-time sometime, and I would work the 12-hour shifts, so I had extra time off. And then on the side, I would do these little comedy shows and acting things. So I always did it. But I always wrote poetry and short stories, and I would go perform like these poetry readings, like poetry jam.
Right.
I've been doing that all these years. I still do it.
Okay.
But it wasn't until a couple of years ago when COVID was in effect, that I said, I think these chapters are chapters of a book. But otherwise, I didn't really set out to write a novel. I just took the box out.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Right.
But I have tons and tons of short stories and poetry books.
So have you considered writing another novel now that you've got one under your belt?
Oh, boy. It's like it's like almost like on the same order of thinking about moving. It's something like, oh my God, I don't know if I could do it. But I think once if I just sat down and just started doing it, I think I probably could. And I think I might have an idea about something, but it's just it's a big undertaking. Although I have to say, the one that I did, I think basically the writing part was pretty fast. It was, because being that I did it on a typewriter and I didn't have another copy, once it was done, I took it to Staples and they photocopied the whole book. And I was crying, please don't lose this. I don't have another copy. I didn't do it on a computer. And they were like, what are you, crazy lady? But so that, then when I sent it to the publisher, that editing process took longer, not because they were making changes. I decided to make the changes because when I first sent it out, like for instance, it would say, my mother and I went to the store. And then I realized that the language should be, me and my mother went to the store, because it was an 11-year-old kid from Brooklyn.
Exactly.
So once I did that, I had to change the dialogue of the whole book. So that was my own OCD that made me go back and rewrite it until it sounded correct to myself. So that was
I loved it though, because it felt very authentic. When the 11-year-old is talking, when we've got Mickey out there, or Mikey, out there
Yeah.
talking, right? I felt very much like she was actually telling me the story. I didn't feel like someone else had tried to write her. Instead, I felt like she actually was telling me this story, and it was great. So you did a good job. I think that even though it was probably a lot of editing and you almost wanted to pull out all your hair, the editing process is one of the hardest, right? But the good thing is that in the end, I think it probably really helped your book, because it felt very much like an 11-year-old.
Thank you. So yeah, I appreciate that. That's what I wanted to do, because once I read it out loud to myself, I said, this doesn't sound right. I wanted to sound authentic. And then I just felt like I was talking. Matter of fact, during the process when I was writing the book, my daughter went to a psychic. And the psychic said to her, what is your mother doing? She's typing and typing away, talking to all her dead relatives. And
that's exactly, yes, I am.
That's exactly how I felt. I felt like I was having a conversation with them.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why it came, it came out authentic, is because I kind of put myself back there into the place where, so that I really felt like I was there with them. Right.
So I was really impressed too. Now, I think it impresses me because I did not grow up in an Italian community, but the fact that you would throw in the Italian and the Sicilian and the English kind of combination phrases, I got a kick out of those. That's another thing I think that made it feel very authentic, because I felt very much like I was being brought into a neighborhood that encompassed mostly Italian, and then you threw in a few Irish and a few other,
right, sprinkled in, well, because I grew up in the same household as my grandparents. My grandfather had a 6-family house, which pretty was much customary back then in Italian families. We had an apartment, they had an apartment, my cousins had an apartment upstairs. So we basically all lived together, we were side by side in the same building. So I was very, very close, especially to my grandmother. And and I would be hanging out the clothes with her, and going shopping on Saturdays, pushing the shopping cart. And it was all the customs that we did. Every Saturday night, we had to go visit what they called gumadas, which was the Italian word for my lady friend, bring a cake, and my grandfather would bring a bottle of homemade wine, and and it was like, oh my God, I got to start hanging out with people my own age. I'm hanging around with all these old people all the time. But so everyone that I got a lot of good positive feedback that people said they felt like they were really there. So I'm happy about that.
Of your are there any relatives that are in your book that have read your book?
Let's see. Well, my parents dead. Most of them are dead, actually. Most of my friends, like the one that was my best friend, she was, of course, she read it. She was in it. But as far as the older relatives, like my parents and my grandparents, they're all passed away already. So none of them, because they're already gone. Just my the characters that were.
So your close friend that read it, did she feel like it represented the childhood that she had as well? Like, did it ring true for her?
Yeah, well, of course, I changed her name too.
Yeah.
And then she clowns around with me, actually, because I might as well say it out loud now. Her actual name is Joanne. Originally, I made her name as Joni. She said, well, that's too close. Everybody's going to know it's me. You better change it. So that's how I changed her to Cassie. But she said, you're talking about me. You're telling everybody that I was a know-it-all, that I was but she was joking. She liked it, though.
Good.
She didn't get insulted. But a couple of other people got a little sensitive, and then I felt bad because my intent was not to deliberately hurt anybody's feelings, of
Right.
course, but I wanted to make it as true to life as possible, because that's how it was. So, but I did change the names, but obviously changing the names was not sufficient when it came to the actual people who lived on the block. They knew whoever everyone was that I was talking about.
Right.
So
of all the stories, I think you said there were 42 chapters. Is that what you said? 40?
yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Which of those stories was your favorite? Like if you had to pull one out and say, this story kind of defines everything for me, which story is that?
Which one? Oh,
Yeah.
I like the one about George, the ice cream man. But as far as defining the whole book, probably the Two Left Feet story about, that's how I got the title of the book. And it brings into play now. I had to ask my brother, did my mother really do that? Because I think I've been telling stories my whole life that
You weren't sure if it was real.
between fiction and reality. And I'm like, because she was tough, but she was very strong and tough. But no, she didn't actually make me wear the 2 left feet. But it brought across her personality and her strength of character. The thing about the dancing dog, with my aunt, I was very close to her, and she was like such a sweetheart. She was just like always cooking and cleaning, and she had all these multiple jobs, and that I think was important because it showed that she was such a hard worker and so selfless, and she gave of herself to everyone. She was always looking to make a few dollars and doing all these different multiple jobs, selling Avon, selling Tupperware, and I was like, oh my God, you're going to need a bunch of elves to help you do all these jobs. But and they did have the dog, the German Shepherd, and I don't know how I made it that the dog actually was barking and dancing with us. I thought that was really cute. So like I gave the dog a superpower, and then the guy on the roof that had the birds with the bird cages. I don't know if you remember that one.
Yeah.
That was real. There were, because everybody had that. They all had those pigeon coops, and how I saw him and how supposedly he was supposed to be a bad boy, but then I said, wow, anybody who could make these birds come back to him. And, he was like St. Francis of Assisi. So I kind of like at the end of every chapter, I kind of put a spin on it and said, well, like, you can't judge a book by its cover.
Right.
You thought this person had these characteristics and these negative traits, but actually there's a positive side to them. So if I had to pick one chapter, it's hard to say because I think they all came into play to feed on and add on each other.
They did. I was just curious if there was like if you were in a group and you were told you had to tell one childhood story, like which is the one that's going to come out?
Well, when I do a lot of book readings, like in bookstores and schools and stuff like that, I do read the one about the ice cream man, and I read the one about Norman, the one that like the so-called slow boy who sat on the stoop and had his magic radio. Although my daughter and people seem to, she can't get it through her head that she thinks that I am being disrespectful. But I said, no, I read it to a class of junior high students, and they got the message behind it, and they knew that because I put a positive spin on it, that, that he was, they might have called him slow back in the day, but I gave him like this superpower. So I think that was a very important chapter, you know.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of good lessons in the book to kind of give you that idea that, like you said, not everything is what it seems.
Right.
There's a lot of things going on that we don't necessarily have access to all the information.
Right. And especially, I mean, you listen to the audio book, how the music was a big part of the book. Right?
Yes.
All the song, I put the songs of because I, Googled songs from 1963 because that was the basic year of the book when I was 11, and I threw those song titles into the,
I know. I loved that too. Too. That was great.
The old woman who was our blind babysitter. she actually did baby. I didn't really lock her in the bathroom, but the Beatles, it was the Beatles' first night on Ed Sullivan, and but I exaggerated that she fell down and she had to go. The ambulance came, and she was still playing the game with the song. But then of course, like I showed that I did have a heart and I did have a conscience when I went to visit her at the nursing home every week with my mother, and my mother didn't even punish me because she saw how bad I felt because of the woman fell down. So
Right.
I think, yeah. So I was hoping that came across, that I did try to show, like, not only redeeming qualities, not only with the characters, but in myself, that I was learning. And one of the main ones that I liked the best was when I took my grandfather to the dentist.
That one, oh my gosh, I laughed at that. That was, yeah.
Yeah. And that actually happened also. And I did pray because I grew up Catholic. And when he turned his back, I did it. And he was laughing at me because I prayed. And so I brought, that into play. And I thought that was important also. And that's when I think in the book where she started realizing her own voice and her own, that I wasn't afraid to speak up and say, when he said, well, you prayed for nothing, your grandfather's fine. And I said, praying is never for nothing. It can always help. So I think she started opening up her mouth and her voice at that point. So I think it did show.
She kind of recognizes like what things matter to me,
right? Yeah.
And she began recognizing that how much her family really meant to her, and how much, like her religion meant to her, and her friends, and her, like, these are the things that matter in my life. And I'm not going to, I need to stand up for them. I need to be there to stand up for them. And I liked that. And kind of in the end, I think she recognized that her superpower was just being her.
Yeah. Well, Well, the thing about that, she thought once she got these sneakers that were flyers, that she thought she would be able to fly, because the word flying was in the title of the sneaker.
Right.
And she had a crazy imagination to begin with. So she kept thinking she could fly. And this was going on in her head. She wanted to test out her theory. And she would run and jump and then fall on her face in the street. But then at the very end, I hope it came across that you realize, when she was chasing the man that stole my grandmother's pocketbook at the block party, that I ran after him and that I did catch him, and that I did jump up and do that up and away thing. Because then I said, wow, the roof is covered in pigeon crap. Right. And then Frank Sinatra was singing, fly me to the moon. Yeah. So, yeah. So I said to people, I said, did you get it? That they said, no, yeah, they got it. That it meant that I was able to fly after all, right? Yeah.
Right. I just thought that the book ended well. Everything tied up nicely. It was just a great story. So you said you kind of have another idea for a book. I'm curious. Is it like a sequel, or is this something totally unrelated?
Yeah, no, I really like. Matter of fact, my neighbor who read the book, she said, you have to do part 2. You have to do her as an older teenager. What happens to Mikey later on, like when she's like 17 or 18,
and all of the things, right? Yeah,
that type of thing. Yeah, like when I became a hippie, because now it's the late 60s versus the early 60s. But no, I was just thinking something more on the order of what's probably already been done. Like a large apartment building, with all
with all the characters.
Yeah, calling it like a filing cabinet of lives. Each apartment, the stories that and how they intermingle with each other. That they all live in the same building, and you bring up the different chapters, the different characters, and how their lives intertwine. Something like that. I just thought, of course, just thinking about it is and doing it is
I love that idea. So I think that you're right. I'm sure that there are stories that have, the characters who all live together in one place, but that just because a setting has happened before certainly doesn't mean that you can't do a book, because if that were true, there'd only be one World War II genre book out there, and that's not true. So you just find your angle and then you go with it. I think that would be awesome. So Tomasina, you have to let me know when you've written it, so that we can.
Okay, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's I am very busy, doing things right now. I'm doing the dinner theater shows, and
Right.
I'm very active, like in my church. I put on little plays and skits, and stuff like that. And so yeah, I'm still just grateful to be able to be busy and do things that I enjoy doing every day. But yeah, the idea of writing another book is definitely in my head. But like I said, it's just giving myself the time,
The
the
time, right.
quiet, yeah,
And,
and to
and
just.
and just so you know, we do not want COVID again or anything like it,
Oh
so that
no,
you
no,
have time to
nothing.
write. So
Right. You don't have to. Yeah, I don't want to be locked up in order to
no,
be able to do it.
no,
Right.
let's not do that again. So how could people reach out if they wanted to chat with you about your book, or to I don't know, even find a way to get you and your troupe to come and do a performance or whatever for them? How should they contact you?
Yeah. Okay. Well, as far as if you Google New York Dinner Theater, t- uh, theater spelled THEATRE, New York Dinner Theater Associates. We do shows like in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. We went as far, where else? Basically New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, I think, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Mhm.
But we haven't really traveled further away from there. But there's like a variety of shows. If you Google them, or you can, I guess, I don't know how you could contact me, I guess through Facebook
Or
or
Facebook?
whatever.
Okay.
And then, yeah, and then I will contact my producer if you're interested in doing a show. Because we have one that's called The Sopranos, which was a spoof on the TV show, The Sopranos. And it's supposed to be his retirement dinner. But it's a lot of fun. It's all singing and dancing and comedy. And we pull all the audience members together to dance, and they have a dinner. And then there's Joey and Mary's Irish Italian wedding, and the Michelina wedding, which is the Jewish wedding. There's a murder mystery one, and the honeymooners spoof on the honeymooners, which is really funny. So there's a variety of shows.
Sounds
And
wonderful.
yeah, it's fun. It's a lot of fun. I try to do it as long as my bones and my brains can keep going.
So if someone wanted to contact you then about your book, like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
having a book club and I would love for Tomasina to come with our
Oh,
book club,
okay.
is the best way to reach out maybe on your Facebook page? Is that a good way to get up with you? Or
Yeah, I think so. Or maybe
okay,
email or Facebook, because I have done private, like people's private little book
right,
clubs, reading my
right.
book with them. I've done that, and readings for like the Kiwanis and Knights of Columbus and all those little book reading things. Um, but yeah, so the book is on Amazon and
Right.
Barnes and Noble's online, and the audiobook and the Kindle. It's all out there on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles. But as far as to reach me personally, I guess just Google my name, and I guess through Facebook, or I guess maybe my email address. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll put that down in the comments below so that anybody who wants to be able to reach out to you can do so. That would be great.
Yeah,
I
and
want
I'd
to,
love to.
yeah,
I'm sorry, I just wanted to
go
say,
ahead.
and people who do read my book, I've gotten a lot of really nice, great reviews. I don't know if you saw on, Amazon,
Yes.
but whatever site they got the book on. Yeah, I appreciate reading good reviews. So if they read it and they enjoyed it, I appreciate them writing me a nice review.
Yeah,
If they
that
didn't
is,
like it, then if they
just
don't
be
like it,
quiet,
you can
right?
keep your mouth shut.
Yeah. That's one thing as an author that I agree that, if you read it and you enjoy it, let people know, because it helps us. It really helps us to get the word out there about our books. So
Right. And it's nice to know that, that your work was appreciated
yes,
and understood, and the intent that you meant it, and that the idea came across and people enjoyed it. So,
absolutely.
yeah.
Well, Thomasina, thank you so much for being with me today. I have enjoyed talking to you.
Thank
Um,
you.
I'm trying to come up with a way for me to get up to New York and come to one of your dinner theater shows. I know I would
Oh,
enjoy them.
And you're in North Carolina?
I'm in North Carolina, on the coast of North Carolina. Yeah.
You know what? Actually, one of the people from our dinner theater group, he's in South Carolina, Myrtle Beach, and they were thinking about possibly going down there to do one. So, if you in North Carolina want to do a show down there, I'll give you Google New York Dinner Theater Company Associates, and maybe we could make an arrangement that we could
Wouldn't that be
get
cool?
down there.
It's
Yeah.
interesting. You said South Carolina and Myrtle Beach. Although I live in North Carolina, I am 20 minutes from Myrtle Beach.
Oh, okay.
So if
That's
you are down this way, you let me know and we'll get together for lunch.
Oh, that's great. I would love to. Thank you so much. Yeah, yeah, I really appreciate you doing this. Thank you. It was so nice. And
Thank you for listening to Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch. Tune in next Tuesday for another podcast episode.